Hello and welcome to Inside Germany. My guest today is considered to be the most important fashion journalist here in Germany. Originally from New York, Melissa Drier arrived here in Berlin in 1985 and has been writing about fashion and lots more for over 25 years for Women's Wear Daily. This is the daily newspaper of the textile industry worldwide. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You've been writing about the fashion business for, I would say, almost 3 decades now. And
It's more.
Oh.
That's scary.
OK.
Yeah,
And every business has its ups and downs. So where are we at the moment? Is it a sort of wonderfully innovative, exciting time in the fashion business, or is it all a bit drab at the moment?
No, it's neither. It's overloaded. I mean, basically, as in every other aspect of our lives, we're dealing with information overload. And so there's just too much, too fast all the time. But, I mean, if it's actually, I have to say, the last season shows that just came out, Milan, New York, Paris, were brilliant. Were really brilliant. So it's a very good season. What happens in the end in the stores, I mean, I think it's very hard for consumers because things, or for me personally, as a woman or as a man, we keep getting so much all the time that it's very hard to make things your own, because before you know it, by the time you've made it your own, they're already playing with something else, and then that something else comes back in 2 years' time. We used to have a bit more time in between. So.
Now, I mentioned at the beginning Women's Wear Daily, a daily newspaper for the industry. Now, I've heard of Vogue and Cosmopolitan. I hadn't heard of before I started researching you, Women's Wear Daily. So who exactly are you writing for? Because it's a very powerful newspaper.
We're writing for the industry. Though in New York, you actually have people, New York's one of the cities where you can buy it on a newsstand. I don't think you certainly can't here. But we are definitely writing for the fashion industry. And so that means designers, retailers, the people who make fabric, everybody. And it also involves the cosmetic industry as well. Because in America, with the department store structure, cosmetics are a very big part of their business. So it made sense to have that all together.
Now, with your vast experience, can you spot a trend coming, or are you actually interested in trends?
I used to be more, but I have always said, I was a menswear editor in New York, but I would always say when I really like something, it usually means it's not going to sell for at least 2 years. I like to go out there and sort of do this, let's sponge up the zeitgeist and try and figure out what's going on, but not, I do it much more, in a more relaxed way than I used to. When I was in New York, yes, I mean, you really were just trying to be absolutely on the pulse, but I was also in my 20s. I think it has a lot to do with where you are in your life and how much new you need.
And you mentioned New York a number of times, but in 1985, you suddenly made the decision to leave New York. When you made the decision, I believe, you hadn't got a job in Berlin, but you'd already decided, I'm going to Berlin. So why Berlin?
That was everyone's question. I mean, Nino Ceruti's, and it was everyone, but Nino Ceruti said, who is he? And I was really angry. I said, there is no he, though maybe I knew that there probably could be a he. It was easier to find a he in Berlin than it was in New York. I always used to have a lot more adventures and a lot more fun in Europe than I did in New York. But it was just one of those things. I first came to Berlin in late '84, or in the summer of '84. I really loved it. I just had a good feeling about it. And this started corresponding to moments where I discovered I was out of love with New York. That was a big surprise. And I really wanted to change my life. And then in order to do so, I came up with this slightly crazy idea. I decided, I thought I wanted to write fiction. I asked myself, you're 33 years old, do you want to be a fashion editor when you grow up? And I thought at 33, if I didn't know, I'd better do something fast. And I just took this leap, which was insane. But I think if it had been a more rational decision, I probably wouldn't have done it.
And you arrived, actually, in West Berlin, West Berlin surrounded then by a wall. As a New Yorker, that must have been extraordinary to be enclosed by a wall.
No, you didn't. In the beginning, you didn't feel it. I didn't run up against the wall that often. You know, it didn't, I wasn't going into East Berlin that often, and you didn't really notice it. And plus, the first year or two you're in a place, you sort of getting to know it. And my exploration was basically getting on the top of a double-decker bus and going to the end. I used to love just doing that. It didn't matter where it was going. But what you noticed is that for my job, I mean, I managed to be in Berlin. For my job, I had to go many other places, and we had to fly very low. That's when you noticed that you were in a walled city, because we were flying. I mean, we once hit the jet stream. It was Pan Am.
Oh, yeah, I should explain to people that, of course, we had to fly below the normal level because the Russians wouldn't let us fly up at the right level, flying out of the city.
It was very turbulent all the time. That was no fun at all, and it was complicated. It was complicated.
And you were here when the wall came down, so do you have an experience of the wall coming down?
Yeah, yes and no, because I'd heard something on the radio, and I called my next-door neighbor, who was German, and I said, and who is a research scientist, I said, Angelica, I hear the wall's coming down. And she said, oh, Melissa, don't be an idiot, go to bed. So I went to bed. And the next morning, you know, it's just... And then I had to leave. I had to go to Paris. And when I came back a few days later, I made sure I got schlepped up the wall, which was not that easy for someone my size. I sort of, you know, skinned my shins doing it.
But it's so true. It was such a surprise, wasn't it?
It was. No one could quite believe it. And I also got teary looking at all of the pictures. And it was extraordinary. And then I had to do a story about this immediate masses of people from the East coming in with their goodie money, going shopping. And that's what I had to do for Women's Wear Daily.
Yeah. You sent us, by the way, some of the most fabulous pictures. We're trying to show a number of them there. This is the first one. Could you explain?
Okay.
This does have a significance to the
this
wall.
is my Oscar Schlemmer moment. It's sort of ballet mécanique. But what it really was, a friend of mine worked for U.S. News and World Report and called me up and said, Melissa, I'm going to this really bizarre sale. God only knows where it was, but it was way out in East Berlin, of military equipment. He didn't know what he was going to find. We just thought it would be really funny to go buy bombs and stuff like that.
What is that?
This is a diver's suit. This is an East German diver's wading suit, I guess. So they were partially underwater. That ring there was to keep you from drowning. You know, it's like gators. It's like, you know, those fishing things, but gone wild. And I just thought, what an amazing thing.
Did you buy it?
I did not buy it. No, I didn't buy it. It's the kind of thing I would buy, but...
Fashion-wise, because I was in the East before the wall came down. I've been there, I mean. And fashion-wise, this meeting of East and West must have been very fascinating post-1989.
Yes, and what you saw in the first year was just this incredible hunger. I think you see it in any culture that suddenly has this hunger to buy. And what were people in the East buying? Because they had, in the beginning, I have to say, in the 60s and so, there were some good fashion and good clothes, let's say, good clothes coming out of East Germany. Then they got stuck in this, everything was in these really drab and the most awful poplin, cotton poplin you can imagine. So everyone looked awful. Everyone ran out and bought the most disgusting furry sweaters. The first things they could do. I mean, it just wasn't a pretty picture. But for everybody else, West Berlin wasn't such a pretty picture either.
No, okay.
So.
Meanwhile, nearly 25 years later, and Berlin has become a very trendy and cool place, and naturally, fashion plays its part in this. It's not Paris or Milan, but it has its special place in the fashion world.
Twice a year, the German capital makes fashion its focus. It's estimated that 250,000 visitors descend on Berlin for Fashion Week, which revolves around three main events. And these are Bread and Butter, the world's leading trade fair for urban and streetwear, the Premium International Fashion Trade Show, featuring more than 1,400 collections, and Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week, where both established and up-and-coming designers unveil their latest looks.
It's an interesting location for fashion. Berlin still only has a fledgling identity as a fashion capital. It needs another 10 years or so.
Berlin has become a fashion capital thanks to Bread and Butter. It's an avant-garde place.
Unlike, say, in Milan, there's nothing homogeneous about it. You see a lot of different designers drawing on very different sources for inspiration.
A number of labels have managed to gain international traction in the last 10 years, including Caviar Gauche and Lala Berlin. Many of them are based in or around Mulachstraße in the central Mitte district. Berlin is home to 800 fashion designers. Most of them struggle to remain afloat and work in relatively humble conditions. Just before the beginning of Fashion Week, we visit Berlin-based designer Kilian Kerner at a casting. The 33-year-old is a poster boy for the development of the city's fashion scene over the past decade. He has achieved what many others only dream of. He employs up to 12 people and is one of the most established young designers in town. Kerner established his label when he was 25. Beginning by designing and sewing t-shirts. Just a few years later, in 2008, he presented his first collection at Fashion Week.
Berlin has the advantage of being fresh. And Fashion Week is new, and that's why so many young labels are on display and get attention, because they're not competing with Gucci and Prada. I think that's good because we're here and we're given legitimacy through Fashion Week.
At the beginning of the 20th century, Berlin was the center of the German fashion industry. After the Second World War and the division of Germany, the textile industry shifted to Düsseldorf and Munich. More than a decade after reunification, in 2003, the trade fairs Bread and Butter and Premium took place in Berlin for the first time. Though critics were skeptical, Berlin Fashion Week continued to grow. In 2007, the Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week was added to the roster, with top model Eva Podbach as its face. Though Hollywood celebrities still may not be sitting front row, there's real industry interest in Berlin's runway shows. 10 years since the first fair, it looks like Fashion Week in the German capital is here to stay.
And my guest is fashion journalist Melissa Drier. We saw that young fashion designer making his way there. Is that what's good about Berlin? It's sort of easy for up-and-coming designers?
It's easy to start, and it's easy to keep going the first couple of years, but then you can really burn yourself out, because what we don't have here is an industry that can anyway support them, where they can link in, gain experience, or even have things produced. And so most people are sort of living on a thread.
But is there an industry in
Well,
Germany?
There is an industry in Germany, but it's not that fashion savvy. Klaus Steilmann, who at one point had the largest apparel manufacturing company here, used to say, after the war, we weren't interested in fashion, we were interested in getting clothes on people. Mm-hmm. And it's about what people say about Germans often, that they're very sensible. And there are a lot of apparel companies, some really strong ones disappeared, like Steilmann, or it was bought and it exists in a much smaller way. But you have a lot of good mid-lines, but when it comes to fashion, the German consumer, but more the German retailer, tends to look elsewhere. Mm. You know, they buy the same big labels that everybody else buys internationally. But Berlin is still a breeding ground. It's just that we have to, and every season gets better, and people get more professional each season. But it's a struggle. That's what worries me most. Not the talent pool. We've got a great talent pool.
But will it become a fashion capital?
Oh my, it could. I mean, we're exploding. I mean, in terms of, when I first was here, I thought retail here was horrible, really horrible, and I used to complain about it a lot. And that went on for years. Recently, the last 5 years, our retail looks pretty good. Let's put it this way. I went to Brooklyn or the Lower East Side to see what, it's supposed to be so hip and so cool and so groovy. And I was there and I thought, Jesus, this looks like Berlin. This feels like Berlin. Brooklyn feels like Berlin. It's the sense that you can discover things, and that's exciting.
I mean, I suddenly thought of the Berlin Film Festival. Yeah. When I came to Berlin, there was, you got lucky if you got one Hollywood star.
Oh, that's true.
And now there's 2, 3 a day.
Yeah.
Isn't there?
Yeah.
And we've got the celeb photo here. This is some time ago, isn't it?
Yeah, it was about a year before Johnny died, and it was rather exciting. I was a men's fashion editor, and I covered Milan, and I knew Johnny quite well.
Johnny Versace, I should say. To
excuse me, and with Liza Minnelli, who I was supposed to look like when I was young because I had this little short haircut. But they did a retrospective here. It was a rather fabulous show at the Kunstforum. And I was wondering to what extent he'd remember me, but as you can see, it was, Melissa, and it was, and you have to meet Liza. And it was rather fun. My parents loved that photo.
Yeah.
Made them less nervous.
Yeah. Well, they came to Berlin.
It took them a while, though.
Yeah.
But my dad had heart trouble, you know,
Yeah.
and they admitted they felt at home here as well.
I should say you're looking very chic.
Merci.
Of course. Are you wearing a Berlin designer?
Yes, I am. I mean, it's a sport of mine, or I just feel that when I buy clothes, which is probably not often enough, that I should wear one of ours. And there are a lot of people I love where it doesn't really work, but this dress is from Antonia Goy, and it's very simple, as you can see, but I have this thing for bat sleeves. It has these wonderful, wonderful sleeves. This is a bracelet from a Berlin jewelry maker, Ina Beisner. And my ring...
But you can hold it still and we can get a close-up on that.
You don't want to see my hand, but here's the bracelet. So also rather simple but off, and that's what I like. I like when things are simple but off. And this is, after many years, husband and I finally got our wedding rings, and from a friend of ours, also a jewelry designer here in Neukölln, Anja Husting. This is from Wan Design, and it's like chain metal, and it will soften over time.
Okay. Let's go back to New York and the beginning, so to say. Are you from Manhattan?
No, I'm from Rego Park, Forest Hills.
Where's that?
That's Forest Hills, where the tennis stadium and where the tennis games were always played.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's where and where the Beatles played.
That's true.
I actually heard them screaming.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, well, I heard them, But,
well, mind you, I think the people in the stadium they didn't hear much music.
No, they heard people screaming.
And this is the fashionable family.
This is the fashionable family. I was 14 in that. Yeah, and I think it was my parents' 25th anniversary. My sister was 17 at that time. She looked so grown up.
Are the family in the fashion business
Yeah,
at all?
they were. Yes, actually, there is. My father was a maker of trimmings. He was on a side branch, but my mother's father, so I say I sort of got fashion through osmosis. My mother's father was a tailor, and he did the patterns. He did the samples for a very famous New York designer of the time called Ben Zuckerman, who made amazing coats and suits in the 50s.
Do you know, I think I've even heard that name, although I'm not a fashionista, as they say. Now, you also, as I said, you sent some wonderful pictures. I wonder if we can get close in on this for another reason. This is a picture you did when you were, say, 5. The extraordinary thing is, look, she did the backside as well. That just goes to show the attention to detail here of that.
I also did another drawing that got me into trouble. Well, my mother thought it was hilarious, but we had to do a portrait of our family, and I drew everyone naked. And so, you see, there wasn't always clothes, and my mother got this call from the kindergarten teacher, highly disturbed, and they thought it was very funny. Yeah. So, I might have been around that age.
Really?
Yes.
At that age, you were drawing naked pictures of your family?
But with red nail polish.
Oh, yeah, you see.
Red nail polish.
And where are you here?
I'm the little one with the bangs. And it was my favorite picture of me for years. The bangs.
On the left-hand side?
Yeah, on the left-hand side.
Yeah. And one more, actually. Well, there's a couple more. First of all, you mentioned about you looking a bit Liza Minnelli-ish.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is that
that's
around
the one.
that time?
No, that's a month before I left for Berlin.
But looking
so you
very
can see I was a little rounder then. But you see I also had drop shoulders even then. That was a great coat, purple and white and black.
Yeah.
And with my sister, and it was taken by a friend of mine who's a photographer as a memento. We were in Tribeca.
Okay, now we're just going to make it embarrassing.
Oh, no, but this is
possibly my favourite. What are you doing?
Okay, this is Melissa's cafe table. It was for a Paris party. A friend of mine was throwing a costume party, a Paris-based party. When I got there, I thought, you're an idiot. Everyone was dressed as an artist. It hadn't even occurred to me. And of course, my husband of the time and I, he came as French toast. We went out and we bought all of this styrofoam board. And I happened to have a lot there. I have Camus on it. I had a little bottle of cognac. And given my build, it sat very nicely on my hips.
You see, when I saw that, I actually thought you were working in some strange restaurant.
I passed strange restaurants. We walked down West Broadway past Odeon. Nobody even looked at us. And there's this grown French toast and a table.
Now, before, we talked about you coming to Germany, but when you were that age and younger, what started your interest in Germany? I believe there was a writer.
Oh, well, there were several, but I actually read E.T.A. Hoffmann from the time I was a child. And I had really the real version. I did not have a bowdlerized version. And I also read him in high school. I did a paper on E.T.A. Hoffmann in high school. And so don't ask me.
He wrote
he wrote The Tales of Hoffmann. So it's The Nutcracker, and he wrote many other they were all very strange novels, which I then read when I got here and was reading German. But the second time it went click was with Thomas Mann.
Thomas Mann?
And Zauberberg, The Magic Mountain. And that was the first time I thought, gee, I'd almost like to know German just to read this in the original.
So it was books?
It was books.
Started you off.
But films as well. Dr. Caligari.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what a typical day is like for Melissa Drier here in Berlin at so-called press days, when journalists get a closer look at what they've seen previously on the catwalk. But first at home in her office, where she lives with her husband, the artist Erwin Leber.
Ja, grüß Gott. Hier ist Melissa Drier, die deutsche Korrespondentin für Women's Wear Daily.
Okay. I'm a correspondent for a fashion newspaper, for fashion trade paper. Today is a good typical day. It started with third quarter figures for the Metro Group. When these figures come out, they've got to get into the paper. They've got to go online, and they've got to get them out fast. Moving to Berlin was a decision on lots of levels. I basically fell out of love with New York. I had a fabulous, fabulous job. I was the fashion editor. I was the one who decided what do we say about Versace, what do we say about Armani that season. It was super, but I didn't like my life. Then we came here, and my first story was about, well, if you're looking for fashion in Berlin, look elsewhere. I'm a collector, but I need a sense of space. And also, cats like to zoom back and forth. We used to do salons in here where we would hang other people's art in here, and people would always ask us where our furniture was, and it was like, well, this is it. Thank goodness I love my husband's work. I find them very soothing, and it changes, and then I get to say, I want that painting until it gets sold. I always say Evan's an abstract realist, but I always see other things in Evan's work. I sort of ruin it for him. He didn't notice the Chevrolet. It's German press days in Berlin, and I'm visiting various showrooms. The designers aren't there, but for me it's a good chance to really look at the collections after I've seen them on the runway. One of the reasons we're at Silk, or I'm at Silk, is because I wanted to see Bobby's work up close. It looks like our frantic and often disheveled world, but I didn't really know what I was looking at until I read the press release. And it is the photographs of the factory catastrophe in Bangladesh. And he decided he wanted to somehow have a comment about it. It's about thinking about what you put on your body and how it's made. they're not all German collections, they're not all Berlin collections, they're just the fashion collections that these agencies work with. I do make judgments, and I am very critical, and I do have an opinion. I think it's why a lot of the younger people in this business love me, because I open my mouth. Adios.
It's interesting seeing that T-shirt there with the picture of the Bangladesh factory. I mean, it's an interesting point there.
No, it wasn't. He worked with an artist, but what wasn't shown there is the thing was beautifully cut also. But he just wanted to get something out. If it affects people, it'll affect people on the second or third instance. You know, they're not going to get it right away. When you see it, you don't get it right away. It looks like jewels until you notice all these people. There are no dead bodies in it, but there could be. Yeah. Bobby is somebody, he just started. He's a brilliant example of what can happen here. Yeah.
You also said there something about, you say that the young people love you because you open your mouth.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're not living in a critical age beyond people saying I like, don't like. They never get into why. And I sometimes get very frustrated when things aren't good enough. And so I tend to say very, politically incorrect things. Or I just basically tell people. But I was always proud that people I've criticized, if they have become very good friends of mine. Designers I've criticized in the past became very good friends of mine, because after the first shock, they began to see what was she saying and why. I write this stuff, it goes out there, not in Germany so much, it doesn't quite work the same way anymore, but I used to really, so now I simply say things and I tell CEOs what I think. Yeah, some can take it, some don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to fashion, Berlin doesn't have the money that Paris or Milan has, but Germany does. I mean, we're living in a rich country at the moment. And I saw in the other film, the 1920s, Berlin was the height of fashion. Why aren't there fabulous shows here like in Paris? Why isn't the money coming in?
No, I mean, it has to do with the structure of the companies. And as I said, we have a lot of good, strong companies, and the really big ones don't do high fashion. They don't. I mean, Hugo Boss for us used to do the most wonderful shows. I've seen some really mind-boggling shows here in terms of production values. But Hugo Boss is good because they do a really fine product, but not for an ultimately high fashion person. For men, you put on a Boss suit, you can look totally up to date, totally fashionable. That's been in the last 10 years with Boss, where they've really been able to push that aspect. But most of the companies here that are big and might have the budget do a fairly mid-market product. And it's the younger ones, but they don't have the money behind them. And that's part of the problem, they can't stretch enough. You need a little bit of money they either got hit on the head for being too crazy, or they get hit on the head for being too normal. And you need a little bit of money so that you can put something out there and stretch. And we have to get the industry to the next level where they can stretch.
Do you think Germans spend money on clothes?
Oh, yeah, they really do. I mean, in the 80s, when I was covering the men's industry, I was always told that Germany kept people, I mean, Versace's come up a lot tonight, I don't know why, but Germany kept Versace alive. And their designer, every major designer has shops. They don't necessarily have shops in Berlin. That's changed in the last 3 or 5 years, where Berlin was a place they wanted shops because it was somehow trendy, but they actually make money with them here. But that's because of our tourists.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about fashion. I wonder, though, you've been here since 1985. That's doing my math
we're
quickly.
28 years.
Yeah. Apart from fashion, what's the big attraction for you, Germany, generally? Or is it Berlin?
No, it was Berlin. It was always Berlin. It was always Berlin. I told the head of the company when he met me, he said, "Oh, you're going to Germany, that's awful." I said, first of all, it isn't awful, and second, I'm not going to Germany, I'm going to Berlin. And it's definitely...
How did you know the difference before you got here?
I was here 3 times.
You'd been here,
I came three times before,
Okay.
you know. Hamburg is another city I like because of the industrial architecture, but it was too cliquish. Berlin wasn't cliquish. You could get right in right away. People I met, I still know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about Munich? I know. I read that you went back and forth from Munich to Berlin for a bit because you had a job down there. And you're a freelancer, still a freelancer?
Well, I'm what they're called as Festfrei.
Yeah.
You know, I am the German correspondent, but that was a period where I took a 9-month break from Fairchild, and they were kind enough to welcome me back when that didn't work out.
And you were going to Munich, and Munich you didn't go down well with Melissa Drier.
Yeah, people were too self-satisfied. I'm somebody, I see a gun on TV and I leave the room. There I had visions of having a sawn-off shotgun because everyone was so self-satisfied, it made me crazy. And I used to tell people I need a bit of grit in my life, a little bit of angst. It was all too pretty. It looked like Disneyland a little bit. I mean, there were things I loved. I know it's beautiful. I know really good people in Munich. The food is really good. And for a long time, the food in Berlin was not really good. And so there's all of that, and you're close to Italy, et cetera, et cetera. But it made me aggressive in a funny kind of way because everyone thought it was just the best place to be. So a little bit of that's happening in Berlin now, you know.
No, actually, I was coming to that because we have a questionnaire which you also filled out wonderfully and wrote lots and lots of stuff for us. Which
I'm a journalist, you know. That happens.
And you put it in our questionnaire, where's your favourite city? And you put Berlin, but you also put for how much longer?
Yeah. I mean, I think the things, it's similar to the fashion industry. The things that made Berlin special are, and yes, it was because you could afford to do things here. You could afford to take chances here. And without really thinking about the financial repercussions, because everything was so cheap. We're still, in comparison to every major city, it's still inexpensive in Berlin, but you know, in terms of rents, all of my alarm bells started going off 3 to 5 years ago, and they're still going off. And so it's a concern of mine. Everything that made the city cool and wonderful and why everybody thinks it's so hot to be here, that's sort of going away.
Is that why you're appearing on the front of Country Life magazines?
This is about culture. This is about culture. It says it's about culture and lifestyle in Brandenburg. No, actually, we bought our house 16 years ago. It was lots of fun running around looking for places, but we also felt a little uncomfortable because there were all these Westies, all these West Berliners that were, you know, snatching things up, and that's not really what it was about. My husband needed an atelier. His work has to do with nature. We just thought it made more sense to try and buy something than to just rent something and throw that out. But for me, it's turned out to be, I think, possibly the best thing I've ever done.
But it's not an escape from... Well, an escape from the stress, but not because you hate Berlin.
No. That happened way before. It was just about... It was part of the Berlin luxury that I could actually manage to do something like that, buy a place, turn it into something, even have some time.
OK. So my guest has her hideaway in the country, and she's not alone. Of course, West Berlin was surrounded by a wall until 24 years ago, and when the Berlin Wall fell, suddenly there was all this beautiful countryside. Oh, it all looks so wonderful.
It is. We have cranes. It's wonderful. And Trappen.
Now, how do the local country folk react to a New Yorker in their midst? Or, indeed, you mentioned there's so many West Berliners there. Are there any locals?
Not where we are. We're the exotic ones. But in the beginning, people would always, and we're sort of outside of a small village, people would always come and say, Ossi or Wessi? And my husband would say, Wessi, I come from the Pfalz, where coal comes from, the ex-chancellor. And I would say, Ossi, I'm from the East Coast, USA.
Oh, OK. Yeah.
And they just laughed.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm Aussie, I'm an East person. I mean, we have this East-West thing in the States as well. There's one guy who calls me New York. I think that's the cutest thing.
Yeah.
They'll just come by and go, hi, New York.
Yeah.
No, but, you know, we're just weird, but people always see us in working clothes. We're always working in the garden, so that whole thing's gone. The hard thing is finding friends there. You don't have many.
Yeah. In the questionnaire that I mentioned you filled in wonderfully, we'll come to that now. You say you like being a foreigner the freedom of not being German. Can you explain that a little bit?
Maybe it's about responsibility. You know, I grew up in the 60s in the love it or leave it period when the moral majority in America was saying to the war protesters, love America or leave it. And even though I was on the protest side, maybe that really got into me. And when I started becoming disenchanted with a lot of things, my feeling was either get involved and do something, and I knew a political career was not something I wanted. It's about power, no matter what side you're on. And so my way of dealing with it was to leave because I didn't want the responsibility. I felt responsible. I still feel responsible for what the country does. And if I couldn't stand behind it, I had to do something else. Whereas in Germany, I mean, part of me, if it wasn't for having, if I didn't have to give up my citizenship to the States, I probably would have become a German citizen.
That was my next question.
I would have done it. I would have done it. And sometimes if something terrible had happened to Obama, though, you know, that was in the past, I was, you know, there have been times where I've considered it. But it's not a smart thing. And as, you know, my background is Jewish. There's something that tells me it's not a good idea to give up an American citizenship, not because of the Jewish question, just in general, of just remembering what the past was like, remembering how important it was to be able to get out. So I think there's a little paranoia that continues, but the idea that it would also, it would be a terrible blow to me to lose my American citizenship.
But you seem to becoming quite German, if I may say. You say something the Germans do extremely well. You wanted to say clearing their garbage, but you end up clearing the garbage yourself.
Well, not clearing it only, it's about sorting it. We're very good about sorting our garbage, but even that, people just throw things in the wrong area, and I'm wondering, why does this bother me? I sort it out.
That's being very German.
Yeah,
and then
it's crazy.
Something the Germans do poorly, which is relax. They can't relax. But you're not very good at that either.
No.
So you're becoming more and more German.
No, I think I was before I started, which is a funny idea.
We've got time for a little more. Favourite German word you put down as Handschuh.
I love Handschuh. It's glove. It's glove. Handschuh. And it's also because I grew up with this ad, let your fingers do the walking in the yellow pages. It went like this, and that looks like a handshoe to me.
Yeah, and the last one, good German characteristics, solidity and order in this sort of the
crazy
society
world.
we live.
Yeah.
Does that make you feel sort of grounded?
Well, I think that's why we all decided that's probably why Angela got in again, because she makes people feel safe, because she's sort of solid and you can't budge her. But that can be a positive thing, and it can also be a very negative thing.
And is 3 terms a good idea?
Probably not.
No.
But, you know, who was there? But probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, I was very happy I didn't have to vote.
Oh, but that's a cop-out.
It is, and I would have made a decision. Who knows what?
Yeah. But are you here to stay, do you think? Yeah, I mean,
probably. I mean, I had a 5-year plan. And after the 5 years...
Oh, I see, the 5 years...
I had a 5-year plan that, you know, and then it was
that
like...
finished in 1990.
Yeah, I was still here, and then I was wondering, why am I still here? Because I have an apartment I can afford. And then I thought, well, it's not the worst reason. And then I just continued, and my life really pulled in. So.
Well, please stay. You lighten up the life, not just in the fashion world here in Berlin. It's been great having you on the show,
it's been
Melissa
a pleasure.
Drier.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for watching. If you want to write into us, do so at insight@dw.de. We love to hear from you. I love to get posts. And if I can, I'll reply myself. Thanks very much for watching. Join us again at the same time next week for another fascinating guest on Inside Germany. And thanks to the crew.
Thanks.
As well. Thank you. Bye-bye.